It's good to see you too. Okay, it's I think 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Everything's being recorded, so by being here, you're giving your permission to be recorded. Your comments and support be publicly transmitted. So my name is Jay Carpenter. I want to welcome you tonight to Grand Canyon University, and I really want to thank Grand Canyon for working with us to get this set up. I found some awesome space, and I'm really excited about what's going on here because just across the hall is a new location for the cyber warfare range. It's going to be opening in a few weeks. And if you haven't been out to the cyber warfare range, out at the ASU Polytech campus and by Williams Field or airport, I highly recommend you check that out. So tonight we're going to be talking about supply chain and blockchain, and we've got two local companies that are startups. They're very exciting. That have people involved that have amazing backgrounds. And we just introduce myself so that you know who I am. I'm Jay Carpenter, and I heard the siren song of blockchain about 3 years ago after being in the telecom space for a long time, and I saw some opportunity in naming, addressing, numbering, and identity. So that's my passion. That's why I started this, and my hope was for something just like tonight to happen, which is all of a sudden we've got some momentum in building community. And that is the mission of Desert Blockchain, and you're all part of it. And this is just one of the events that is designed to bring everybody together, to have some conversation beforehand and afterwards, get to know one another. So let me ask this question. Please raise your hand if this is the first time you've been to a Desert Blockchain event. Oh, wow. That's awesome. Really, really awesome. Normally, we go around the room and everybody introduces themselves. We're not going to do that tonight. Is anybody here a student from GCU, ASU? There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for attending. You're with GCU? ASU. Okay, cool. Well, thank you. And please spread the word that we really want to encourage both students as well as faculty to attend these so that we get a mix of people that are interested in applying blockchain and decentralized web technologies, as well as people that are learning about it and coming up with a fresh view. So anybody that's faculty from either ASU, there we go, you're going to be talking about Aperio, so awesome. And again, please encourage faculty to attend future sessions. So, anybody have any announcements? Okay.
One thing to add. You mentioned the Central Warfare Range.
Yes.
The opening date.
What is the opening date?
October 7th. We're doing a big open house. So we'll have food and all kinds of tours all day long. So
Cool.
Awesome. Check that out.
All right.
What was that?
That's so. If you didn't hear the comment, Elio, first of all, is a key member of the community in cyber security. He's an incredible source of knowledge in anything related to computers or networks or whatever. So if you don't know Elio yet, you should definitely get to know him. And he's an active member of the Cyber Warfare Range. And he just said that on October 7th, which is a Saturday, they're going to have the big grand opening here. So thank you, Elio. Thanks for that announcement. I'd also like to announce that we have a very special participant tonight, which is my wife, Cindy Carpenter. So she's sort of my partner in crime around blockchain. she has to put up with my obsession with blockchain and decentralized web all the time. My complete 24/7/365 focus on that. So let's see. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started a little bit early. I allocated 10 minutes for this. Well, let me ask this. Is there anybody that has something they would especially like to get out of tonight? Something you'd like to learn, something you'd like to go over, something that you're really passionate about? Carlos, you're passionate about high frequency trading, which we're not going to go over tonight, but it really helps me when you sign up for these to put in, some comments about what you're interested in and what you'd like to see, topics and so forth. Later on at the end of the evening, I'll be talking about some upcoming events that we'll have that I'm really excited about. We've got some of the people that will be the presenters in those events here tonight. So how this all came about was we had a couple companies that have been coming to the Desert Blockchain events. Some of the key people from Sweetbridge have been coming. And it just made sense to have a session where we're talking about supply chain, and in particular, we're talking about startups that are happening here in Phoenix. And that, to me, is really, really exciting. So tonight we have Sweetbridge, and Scott Nelson's going to be talking about Sweetbridge. And if you're not familiar with Sweetbridge, I really recommend you take a look at the people that are involved, because I was really impressed with the backgrounds of the people that are involved in this initiative. So, Scott, I'll turn it over to you and tell us a little bit about Sweetbridge.
Jay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a great facility. I can't believe we're next to range. What an amazing thing. Talking about blockchain and hacking. The same. Well, if you look at the recent ICOs, this is badly needed.
Power came out. Excuse me 1 second while we get the video going.
Okay.
The power came.
Like the power.
Oh, did I trip over it? Oh, right there. Is that? I must have done that.
That should help, but that shouldn't impact. Oh.
Okay. Is there any Wi-Fi?
Yeah, the Wi-Fi is Lopes, and there's no password. So let's see.
This is a great facility, though. While we're getting the video stuff hooked up, let me ask a couple questions. How many people? I just want to get an understanding of what people know about, so I can gauge my presentation to, the right audience. How many people in the room own a cryptocurrency? Okay. All right, great. And then how many of those would be something other than, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum, one of the altcoins? Wow, okay, a lot. All right, great. And then how many people in the room know anything about supply chains? Wow, okay. That's unusual for these meetups that I've presented at, to have that much density of people that are in the space and also know something about supply chain. So this is warming up?
It's warming up. Actually, the projectors went off. So
okay.
That's what happened.
And do I need to do anything to present, or will it just go?
You will need to screen share when you're ready to present.
I already am screen sharing.
Okay, with any luck at all, I'll be able to click over to you once we get the video going.
All right, great. So let me, while we're waiting for the video still coming up, let me start with what's motivated us in a crazy project that you're going to find out about in Sweetbridge. We are driven by a belief that there has to be a better way. Have you ever, gone through something and said, "Oh, there's got to be a better way to do this"? Well, we were a bunch of people that were involved in supply chains for some of the largest corporations in the world. And many of the largest companies in the world, their supply chain processes are just amazing when you actually get into the detail. They're both amazing in terms of their complexity, and they're amazing in terms of how people actually get paid. It's absolutely crazy. And there has to be a better way. And this led to us starting with an idea that said, okay, look at all of us who have worked in these large SaaS-based systems infrastructure that sold to major corporations, had lots of experience with operating huge sets of data on giant supply chains, had exactly some of the same issues. The first thing is that we knew that every single supply chain out there is unoptimized to the degree it could be. Every single supply chain of even the most highly sophisticated companies is under-optimized in some way. Another is that the assets in supply chains and in supply chain use are falling in utilization. In fact, every year over the last 40 years, actually 50 years now, the Federal Reserve has been tracking asset utilization in supply chains around the world. And 50 years ago, this number was 90%. That means 90% of the assets were utilized. Last year, it was 75%. And it is continuing to fall. And this is actually happening as a result of us treating something as a commodity that isn't a commodity. A truck is only a commodity when it's empty or full. When it's partly empty or partly full, it doesn't have the behavior of a commodity. Adding an additional pound of weight to an aircraft that's already flying costs almost nothing. Putting another container on a container ship that's already sailing is almost cost-free. And so these assets do not behave the way you would think they would behave when you compare them to things we know about, like corn or energy or something that truly is a commodity. And why is this happening? What's driving these asset utilizations to get poorer and poorer and poorer is hyper competition in a world that should be collaborating around the use. And what has made this happen is creating better and better and better, quote unquote, pricing visibility in the marketplace for what costs are, has actually driven, instead of efficiency, which it would drive in the case of commodities like corn or oil, it's actually created inefficiency. And then finally, liquidity of money. In supply chains, lots of money is tied up between the time somebody orders something and the time something gets paid. It doesn't work like going to the local store when you take out your credit card and swipe your credit card and say, okay, I want to buy something. Well, you make payment right then, or they won't let you walk out the door. Well, supply chains don't work that way. In supply chains, you basically place an order. That order may have to get built or created to be fulfilled. It then has to get shipped back to a party who's receiving it. And then there's payment terms. And those payment terms, the larger the company is that is out there that is being serviced by somebody, the longer they will stretch out their suppliers because they can get away with it. If you want to do business with Walmart, well, your payment terms are not 15 days. They're 60 days, 90 days, whatever Walmart says. And if you won't do that, well, there's the guy coming in the door right after you who will do that. So I'll work with him. Another very crazy thing is that the cost of capital in supply chains means that organizations that can get cheap capital, big companies that have low credit risk can get lots of cheap capital. Those companies can operate amazingly inefficiently compared to other parties who can't get access to cheap capital. And if you look at places around the world where, say, rice is produced, someplace like Vietnam, or coffee, where that's produced, or minerals, where that's produced, these people do not have access to capital. And to compete with larger organizations, they actually have to be 10, 15, 20, 25% more efficient at doing what they're doing in order to compete with people who are just big and just have cheap capital. What this means is that those companies win. And it means that people that actually create efficiency, make the world better, cause your price to go down, actually have the deck stacked against them. So this is crazy, right? This makes everything cost more expensive. It's not more expensive just because it's inefficient. It's not more expensive just because we're not using the assets very well. It's not more expensive just because we tie up money in this process for long periods of time and somebody has to rent the money to people to pay for it. It's inefficient because the parties who get to succeed are just the parties that actually have cheap access to capital, not the parties who actually do the best job, not the parties who create the greatest amount of value, okay? So there has to be a better way, and that's what started Sweetbridge, that we could create a better way. Now,
Scott, if I could interrupt you,
yeah.
I unplugged your laptop, so you might want to plug it back in. So the power doesn't come on.
Great.
Sorry.
Thanks. So, Sweetbridge is not just a single project. We are actually an alliance of projects that are creating a liquid supply chain. And by liquid supply chain, we mean liquid capital, liquid assets, and liquid talent. All of which happen outside of something controlled by a central entity. Now, when people think about what blockchains are, I'm not sure why my slides aren't getting the backgrounds put up, but there's actually a picture of a ship there behind those words. Not sure why that's not showing, but it's not. Most people think of supply chains being container ships or goods coming in from the Far East or something like that. When we talk about supply chain is much bigger than that. In fact, my favorite way of looking at this is it's either Mother Nature or it's the supply chain. So everything you own, everything you eat, everything you wear, everything you live in, everything you work in, everything you commute in, if it wasn't created where it is or didn't grow where it is, it came to you through a supply chain. And what that means is that is an amazing amount of global trade. In fact, it's $54 trillion of GDP. That's global commerce. It's all the activity that occurs that is not financial services, not governmental services, not defense. It's everything else. And that comes to you through a supply chain. So we're talking about 2/3 of all of the global profit that is generated as a result of management of supply chain. Now, how can these things be liquid? So when we talk about liquidity, what we mean is like water. Water, if I poured it out on this table, would flow to the lowest point. It would follow the path of least resistance. It would automatically flow there. We are broadcasting this presentation over the internet through Google Hangouts. We're using a network that's going to be connected, and somebody might be watching this in another part of the world. And that network is routing packets that actually hop from router to router that don't even know how to get it to its ultimate destination. They just know how to get it to the next place. And nobody organizes it. Nobody basically decides where that has to go. Nobody manages that. A protocol automatically figures all that. What's the lowest cost, fastest path to get from here to the other side of the world? We can do that with the blockchain and supply chains, so that money flows the lowest path of common denominator. In fact, in a second, we're going to show you how we can do loans free of interest. Interest-free loans. So we talk about capital, we're talking about unlocking all the money's tied up in supply chains interest-free and letting it just flow to where it needs to go. If you need it, it goes to you. If you need it, it goes to you. Now, it's not because you say, I need it, it's because you have an economic use case for it in a supply chain. And when we talk about liquid assets, what we mean is if an asset is underutilized, it can actually look for capacity. Today, demand searches for supply. In the future, in the blockchain, through protocols, we can enable supply to search for demand, as well as demand search for supply. And this means that we can take underutilized assets, a warehouse or a factory, and actually share it with others who can use that same asset to store things or to make things. And the accounting that's needed to make that something we can do without having to have a joint venture agreement, without having to merge our companies together through a stock sale, can be done through the distributed ledger and a common accounting system. So you can't read this slide. Oh, okay. It's a great slide. So let me tell you what's up here. We're techies, so guess what? We've got to have a stack. This is a stack. At the bottom of our stack is liquidity. This is the financial liquidity. So the very first protocol we are releasing is a protocol that allows you to take any asset, lock it up on a blockchain, and borrow money from the asset you own without selling it and without any other party, no bank, no counterparty, borrow the money from the asset you already own, interest-free. There's 700 trillion valued assets in the world, $700 trillion worth. Actually, there's no agreement about how much there is, but that's the number I've picked out of all the numbers I've seen out there, but it seems to be the most realistic. And the economists that work with us seem to say, okay, I'll pick that number too, because that seems reasonable. There's only 60 to $70 trillion of fiat currency. What this means is that there's only enough currency to basically create liquidity for about 10% of all the value of the assets of the world. Well, that's a problem. That's a problem, because you can't take the money locked up in your inventory or in your equipment or in your facility, receivables, or in the order before you actually make something and convert it into liquidity without actually having a credit rating, without having some kind of capital formation, without working with general liens. And we want to fix that problem. We want to fix that problem. The second is settlement. Today, if you want to transfer money between parties, we typically have to use banks or credit cards. And this is problematic. This has a lot of cost to it. But the focus that people have on this is not where the problem is. People say, well, it's an intermediary. I don't know if I can trust them. These are problems. Let me tell you what the really big problem is. When you borrow money, you pay an interest rate. What you don't know is you're paying for two things. Some of you might know this, but most people don't. The first thing you're paying for is renting the money from somebody else. They have it, you convince them to give it to you versus them using it for some purpose of their own. That means you have to get the money from them. You have to pay them an interest rate to let them rent you the money. The other thing you pay for in an interest rate, the reason why you have that credit card bill that has an 18% interest rate or a 25% interest rate on it, is risk, that you won't pay it back. That risk is distributed evenly by banks across people with a credit risk profile. And our government and other governments have actually codified how you have to do this. Now, the problem with that is that it's just saying that you're in a bucket of people that you have a correlation with that says, I need to charge this much money because of the risk I'm dealing with. here's the deal. There's 54 trillion of global GDP in the supply chain. That's profit, not revenue, profit. That means that global trade, after all the losses, after all the hurricanes, after all the fires, after all the thefts, after all the businesses failed, still generate $54 trillion of GDP profit. After all the thefts, so guess what? That means that the entire supply chain can de-risk the entire supply chain. We have a protocol that allows you to connect your whole supply chain through one tier to the next tier to the next tier and de-risk all counterparty risk in that process. And as a result, you don't need to charge interest for risk. Isolate the risk to where it actually exists. The party who will actually fail, the one who will actually lie, the one who will actually cheat. This is revolutionary. The third is an accounting protocol. It is an intercompany accounting protocol. It's not the same as an accounting system. Don't read accounting system here. But we can tell the difference between, on a blockchain and a distributed ledger, between revenue and expense, between asset increase and liability increase. And if you know that within an ecosystem, guess what? You don't need financial statements. You don't need credit reports. You don't need anything to know whether a party is improving in their operation or actually losing money in their operation. You know what their working capital requirement is. And you can do all of this without needing any third-party entity to tell you anything about it. And you can share that publicly with everybody, which is now a far better credit score than any credit score that exists today, because all credit scores today are nothing more than approximations of, well, people that have this behavior are at a greater credit risk, therefore we're at a greater risk. It's not around what you actually do. Final two is sharing of resources. If you know what all the revenue is, if you know the value of everything because you have to determine the value of the loan against it, guess what? You can now tell if it's used. You know it's used, you know how much value is extracted from its use. You can create sharing agreements that do not require any corporate structure, don't require any contract, and that basically give all the parties that contribute their assets, or physical assets, whatever it may be, an equal share in the benefit that's created. Finally, if you can do that, you can allow talent to start searching for problems and producing benefits to supply chains. And in the benefits that they create, they get to get a reoccurring stream of revenue as a share of the profits they generate for as long as their solution is used. And that changes everything. Does that mean you don't have to work for a corporation anymore? It means that you don't have to work for yourself. It means you can work for an economy, and the value you generate in the economy, you're guaranteed you will participate in, because nobody can basically get around it. You have a common settlement process that's managing all the transactions and knows all the value generated by the efforts and the contributions, including of your time. That's the Sweetbridge protocol stack. So this is a big, huge project. You can't actually see all these pictures here. Sorry about that. But we've got about 22 full-time people as contributors already involved in the project, and another 18 or so who are not full-time. And that number is growing all the time. So we're one of the largest blockchain projects that's ever kind of been launched. We have a variety of partners that are alliance partners. This is some very early alliance partners, but we have a huge number that are actually in development. Mac, right here in the back of the room with his hand waving, is in charge of that. And we have more than the blockchain. So in supply chain, there are 3 technologies, and I would argue there are 4, but there's 3 for sure that everybody kind of talks about, that need to work together to really re-envision the way supply chains work. One is the blockchain. Second is AI. Third is the Internet of Things. And I would suggest that there's a 4th, although it's not talked about frequently, which is 3D printing, which is going to really change the world in amazing ways and is undervalued and misunderstood, largely because it got used for toy type stuff early on. When you create all this, the other thing that you have to have is you have to have a go-to-market strategy. Now, many projects that are out there have great tech, great people building them and whatnot, but they really haven't thought about how do I basically sell this. In our case, what we realized is that's where we need to start. And so we've designed a set of ecosystems which are independent entities. These will be independent entities, not controlled by us, which will have their own sales force, marketing organizations, and their own go-to-market strategies and channels. The first 2 that we have are for supply chain management and law. Those are the first 2. Those are in actual work right now being developed. Why law? Okay, well, the reason law is so critical is that if you want to take the assets of the real world and put them on the blockchain, lock them up in the existing ecosystems. The real world's assets and put them in the blockchain. You can't just ignore that. If you want to basically have a mortgage for your house that's interest-free, you have to have that mortgage into something which can be locked on a blockchain. And if you don't pay back your loan, that has to be able to be sold to somebody else. And there has to be a way to be able to evict you. And you have to be able to tell that, well, you have fire insurance on that place. Got paid. You have to be able to do real world things in real world jurisdictions. And this requires lawyers. And what a fabulous opportunity. Because what if we could change law from a practice which is done by people who charge fees, who have an incentive to increase their utilization because they make more the longer it takes, to a practice where they're paid by assets, not by people, for locking the asset up on the blockchain and then defending any attack against that within the legal jurisdiction. And this can be done for amazingly small amounts of cost as a percentage of the value of the asset. The legal market worldwide is less than 2 trillion. But there's 700 trillion in valued assets, which means even a 3 basis point charge, 0.03%, would be more revenue than all law generates today. But we don't want to stop just there. We've got life sciences, tax and compliance. Why tax and compliance? Don't we want to do all this stuff tax-free? Well, the problem with trying to do everything tax-free is ultimately, my mom, doesn't have any medical care. And I don't know about you, but I'm just not into that. So at some point, we do have to actually, until we actually replace some kind of social structure to support people that need, things, who's going to pay for that? Well, we collectively as society decided we're going to pay for that and we're going to use taxes. I think it's a horrible system. I think it's terribly abused. I think it's spent in horrible ways. It's massively inefficient. But until we have a replacement, I think we ought to keep paying taxes. So let me just zero in closing on liquidity, just to kind of give you a physical example, and I'm going to relate this to you personally. We've already talked about this process of goods, orders coming back. So we've created 2 tokens that are both commodities, so they're not securities. So these can actually be acquired in the United States, and we don't need to worry about who does it. One is a token which will be either the most interesting or the least interesting token you've ever heard of, depending on your point of view. And that's Bridgecoin. Bridgecoin will be pegged to a variety of different fiat currencies. not as a basket, but there'll be Bridgecoin USD, Bridgecoin Pound, Bridgecoin Yen, different currencies, and pegged to those currencies so that its value stays close to the value of that currency. Hopefully extremely close to the value of that currency. This is not the token you want to buy if you're a crypto investor. This is the token you want to price your goods and services and your time in, because it's the token that isn't going to basically devalue overnight by 30% because of, gee, I don't know what. Just as likely as it's going to go up in value in the next 24 hours by 30%. The other token is Sweetcoin. Sweetcoin is our membership coin. It's a limited supply token, so it'll only ever have 100 million of them ever created. And if you own it in proportion to the borrowing that you're doing, you get interest-free loans. You not only get interest-free loans, you get interest-free settlement. So if you use our settlement bus and settlement process, you want to do foreign trade, you want to do transactions across the world that are converted from dollars to pounds, free. And then, what happened?
I goofed up your your sharing. There we go. Yeah, cool. There we go.
All right. The other thing it allows is, unlike a lot of projects, we actually will have a fiat bridge and a commodity bridge as part of our project, which allows you to move from fiat currencies into cryptocurrencies and from cryptocurrencies into fiat currencies as part of our project. And if you own Sweetcoin in the proper proportion, as a member of Sweetbridge, as a citizen, oh, now the slides look good. As a citizen in our economy, what happens is you get to do that free. So this allows us to create a situation like this. So we got Alice and Bob. Everybody has an Alice and Bob story in their project. We got our Alice and Bob story, except it's just Alice. So let's put this in personal terms for those of you who said that you had crypto investments. Let's say that you wanted to take, you can see this is a while ago, I got 50 ETH at $200. It's not, that's not what these slides were created a while ago. But let's just say it was still trading at $200. And that was bought by you for $10,000, right? 1,000 of ETH. Now, after you bought it, you decided, oops, I want to do something. I need to buy some equipment maybe because you want one of those new ant miners that does, you know, these incredible hash rates. Or maybe you just, you know, want to take a vacation or something. And your choices today, you either sell your ETH or you basically, you know, have to get the money from some other place. So in our environment, you can take that ETH and you can get Bridgecoin USD. And you can get that for a percentage of your ETH at 50% of the ETH you own. So if you own $100,000 worth of Ether, you can get that for $50,000. If you own 10,000 in our example here, you can get 5,000 Bridgecoin. Each Bridgecoin's worth $1. Then you can do whatever you want. You can take that money and you can basically, you know, buy groceries, buy that new ant miner. You can go off and buy some more cryptocurrency if you want. You know, whatever you want to do. Maybe invest in some Bitcoin. The point is you didn't need to sell the asset. I didn't need to sell the asset at a time when it wasn't favorable to me to sell the asset. I can hold on to the asset, and then let's say ETH goes up to 300. I now am able to basically pay back my loan and actually make still participate in the increase in the value of my asset. Now this is an easy to understand example from the crypto space. In this case, Alice was able to borrow money from her ETH without selling it, which led to her being able to hold it while it appreciated in value and made a $500 profit. But now imagine Alice is a business. And let's say that what she's got is she's a farmer. And she's not selling Ether at a disadvantage. She's selling her crop in advance because she needs money to fund the farm to basically produce the crop that she's going to sell. On average, Alice will take a 20 to 30% discount on her crop by basically selling it early. And if you're a farmer, a rice farmer in someplace like Vietnam, you will probably take even a greater cut than that. So this doesn't just work or help the crypto investment community. This helps people in real businesses and in depressed economic environments to be able to take and keep the asset, keep that rice until it's advantageous to sell instead of selling it later. And now the difference can be really big, because if it's 1.5 million and you have a 2%, a 20% increase in value because you sell your crop later, that's a big number. That's $300,000. All of this can be done with our app, which will be debuting here in the next couple weeks, on your phone, in minutes, without another party, and it's you loaning you money. And this is possible because of crypto economics. And it's one of the crazy things that the blockchain is basically enabling, is we can now re-envision our economic framework. And we can actually answer that question. Is there a better way? Yeah, there is. And we can now make it. And that's what Sweetbridge is doing.
Cool. Thank you, Scott. Did you buy the pizza with crypto?
I don't know, did we buy it with crypto or not? I don't know.
We can thank Sweetbridge for the pizza tonight, by the way. Okay, are there questions?
Are there questions? Yeah. Yeah.
So this is not based on the Bitcoin blockchain?
It is not. We're polychain, meaning, so our initial launch will be on the Ethereum blockchain, but we will support very rapidly multiple chains, including both public and private chains. So Bitcoin, for example, will be an asset that we will support very rapidly. Yep.
So you can't mine this specific?
No, we are not a blockchain ourselves. We're a polychain, which we're probably the first major project that's a polychain project, that meaning that we don't operate just on one chain, we operate across all chains. Does that make sense?
Kind of. So once it's been used, once this Bitcoin's been used as a Sweetbridge coin,
Yep.
Is it forever a Sweetbridge coin?
No. It never loses its Bitcoin never loses its identity. You still own it. It's still yours. It's just you can't sell it to anyone else. It's locked up in a smart contract that basically prevents that until you pay back the money.
During it, so it's only its identity as Bridgecoin or Sweetcoin is only during the length of the smart contract.
It never gains an identity as Bridgecoin. It's just that we lock your ability to transfer it to anyone else in a vault, a digital vault, on chain, and prevent you from basically transferring it to anyone else until you and give you in exchange Bridgecoin. By the way, this was done by banks for 4,500 years until 1880, and the introduction of the gold standard by all of the industrial nations of the world. And that's what ended that being done. And it was called something, a banknote. Anyone ever heard of that? It was a banknote. You took your asset to the bank, gave it to the bank produced a banknote. This is still done in places like Scotland, where they still do this today. Yes?
I'm gonna hold off the questions at this point until we have, at the end, we're gonna have a panel, basically.
Great.
But Scott, I did want to ask you, you've got what's it called, a token generation event coming up?
We do.
Would you say a little bit about that?
Sure. So we will have a very unusual token generation event because it's being done in different countries. Each country is being done under a regulatory environment, regulatory structure that is controlling commodities today. We will be actually doing the U.S. first, and We will be selling Bridgecoin first in a that you can buy for dollars and other cryptocurrencies. So unlike a lot of projects, you can actually just use dollars to acquire it. It will be redeemable in dollars for the same dollar that you bought it for until you use it to buy Sweetcoin. Once it's used to buy Sweetcoin, which there'll be a difference between when you can buy Bridgecoin and when you can buy Sweetcoin. During that difference time, we will be doing creating your digital identity in our economy. We'll be making you a citizen, which makes you fully KYC, AML compliant, and also gives you a digital identity that will be good within our ecosystem, either as a company or as an individual. Then we start a drip. We will be releasing Sweetcoin, which is if you're into owning something that might appreciate in value, that's the one you want. But you'd be silly to sell it because you can turn around and borrow money from it, as soon as you get it. So it's like, why? And if its value goes up, you can borrow more money. So why sell it? And that's what its design is. That will be being released about 30 days after Bridgecoin starts selling. And Bridgecoin should start selling in the United States here in the next month or two. Can't tell you exactly when yet, but that'll give you kind of a window. Just follow our webpage and you'll get the announcements.
You have to use Bridgecoin to buy Sweetcoin?
It's the only way you can buy it is to buy it with, but you can buy Bridgecoin with lots of things. So.
Is it open to general public or only?
It will be open to only U.S. citizens. Kind of odd, but it's the opposite of a lot of things that have been done so far. But then it will open up for other countries and their citizens one at a time. Every new country we open up will get the same deal economically as the first, no matter what has happened in the U.S. market. So if our tokens went up in price and became worth twice as much or something, that won't influence the price that we'll be releasing them at when we release it for the euro, or when we release it for the yen, or when we release it for, any of the other currencies that we'll be releasing.
Cool. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Scott. All right. Now we're going to hear about Aperio with Todd Taylor, who is a faculty member at Arizona State University, and you teach supply chain. So, Todd, tell us about Aperio.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Scott. That was great. So just to give you a quick introduction, I'm not a normal tenure track professor. I'm what they call a professor of practice. So I came out of industry and many years practicing supply chain and started teaching just 2 years ago at Arizona State as I came back into the country from some time in China, where I was working for IBM on some big supply chain projects. I was the high-tech electronics industry lead and supply chain practice lead for IBM in China. That's where I was exposed to blockchain. So in China, the lab that supported my high-tech industry team was the Watson Lab, the lot of the early blockchain research. And we were looking first at blockchain as a platform for IoT, right? We had all these connected devices and sensors, and we saw the problem of, hey, how can those things transact without our manual intervention? How can we keep a record of all of those data inputs and transactions? And hey, blockchain might be a solution here. So we did some tests and some pilots and proof of concepts and things, and that was my exposure to blockchain early on. So as I came back to the US and started at ASU, it became my area of research. So I wanted to see, obviously I saw early on the applicability to supply chain. Supply chains are nothing but a series of transactions of one sort or another, and information sharing and capital and material flow. So being able to apply blockchain to some of these supply chain challenges became my area of interest. I've got a good friend here, Ken Staker, who's really the brains of the outfit. He won't admit it, but he really is. Longtime SAP developer and implementer and integrator. And the thought that came to us early on was, hey, we're going to replace SAP and Oracle and everything else out there, right? Because blockchain is going to allow us to replace that all. We started by creating a core sourcing platform. And maybe click through a few of those slides. Yeah, next one. So today, if you know how supply chains work, you know that we've got a bunch of suppliers and we've got a bunch of distribution channels. How do we have that work? Yeah, suppliers this side and distribution channels that side. You know that, if you grew up in supply chain, you know that we transitioned from EDI and vans to web-based EDI and EDI document exchange. Some industries went to XML-based document exchange, RosettaNet, Cidex, Pidex, all those different document formats in order to exchange information to transact amongst business partners, right? If you want to, when a big electronics company, which my focus was electronics, big electronics company wants to buy and build a bunch of servers, they send out forecast information, they send out requests for pricing, requests for availability. Eventually they get to, hey, we want to order stuff to build these servers or whatever it is they're building, and the documents just start flying back and forth, not automatically. Username, password, here's an order. In RosettaNet terms, that's a 3A4 pip. In EDI terms, it's a, what is it, an 860 document, right? There's a number for it. And then there's an order acknowledgement from those who receive it or are intended to receive it. Manual login, username, password to receive it and to respond appropriately. And that same process happens as you move from order to the fulfillment and the delivery of a given product through its manufacturing cycle, right? Eventually it gets to the point of manufacturing and then it's hopefully shipped to the customer and received by the customer. But the amount of document exchange is really amazing. If this is the OEM, the electronics OEM, and they receive a demand signal and they place an order to their tier 1 suppliers for the components that they need, and then those tier 1 suppliers send demand signals and information to the tier 2 suppliers, to the tier 3 suppliers, thousands of documents that start to flow just to affect the building of 1,000 servers or 1,000 computers is really, really amazing and labor intensive. A couple companies that I've worked for, they spend upwards of $1 billion a year managing that XML gateway or that EDI gateway. That doesn't count all of the time that all of the tiers of suppliers spend logging in username and password, managing it from their side, and the gateway management and everything else that goes along with that. So there has to be a better way, right, Scott? And that's what Ken and I thought, hey, there's a better way somewhere here, right? So click to the next one, blockchain, right? So we rethought, how can we make this work? How does this work in a frictionless environment? How can we make this flow without all that manual document exchange and manual information exchange between parties? So what we came up with was an asset-based blockchain system, right? So we created a little proof of concept. We were lucky enough to have a really large electronics company ask us to create a proof of concept. And the proof of concept really came to somewhat this. And I'll give you a little bit of an explanation here in the time that we have, but suffice it to say that instead of document exchange, you're simply calling the forecast or the item master, the product description, the product detail, or the price record, or you're calling those assets in the blockchain world. Those assets become assets, those orders or forecasts or pricing records or item masters become assets in the blockchain, and then your network of partners make updates to those assets as that order moves from order to assembled product to finished goods product that is sent out to to your customers. Okay, so instead of all the document exchange, it's simply creating an asset and having updates to the asset by the participants of your supply chain network. Easier, right? Any questions on that? Good. That's it, more or less, right? There's a whole bunch of advantages to that. There's, you know, and this is a little bit more detail around the description. Those are some of the assets that would happen in a typical configure to order type supply chain flow, right? We start with item master forecast. There's an update to that forecast from the participants in the network, price record, inventory record, customer order, production order, updates, and an invoice at the end with payment against that invoice asset. Okay? And click to the next one.
It's complicated, right?
No, not really. Not complicated, right?
No, in the real world today.
Oh, in the real world, it's terribly complicated. But we think there's an opportunity to change that. The proof of concept bore out well, and the company that we presented it to really, really liked it. And we hope to move that from just, you know, we've built a technology platform, and we have a Hyperledger Fabric-based platform that we created that affects those transactions. And you know, with all the permissioning and all of the smart contract code and all of the other pieces that go along with that. So Ken is the brains behind that side of the operation. We also have not a ton, but a dozen really smart MCS students from ASU that have helped us do the coding on some of the back end and front end pieces of it. But now imagine what that could look like infused with Bridgecoin as a liquidity capability, right? Now all of a sudden, because what the thought that I had, and we can move this, now I've got another topic I wanted to cover that I don't know that we'll get to around conflict minerals, because we had a similar project to this sourcing project around the conflict minerals challenge that some of you are very, very familiar with. But it's similar in the way the platform was built. But I wanted to get to this piece of how it works with Sweetcoin, because imagine that core sourcing platform and network now infused with Bridgecoin and Sweetcoin. Because the challenge I thought as we got into this was, oh man, this electronics company is going to have to go through the exact same pain that we went through in the transition from EDI vans to XML documents and gateways. We're going to have to go through the same mess that we went through back in the late 80s and 90s into the 2000s, the same onboarding process of all the suppliers trying to convince them to publish information on the portal or at least implement and use our XML documents. I thought, oh, we're going to have to do the same thing now with this, you know, this blockchain process. But introduce Bridgecoin into the process, infuse liquidity into a network, and now as you operate across those tiers that we showed earlier, instead of those tier 2 and tier 3 and tier 4 suppliers having to finance the working capital costs of everybody else upstream from them or downstream from them, however you want to look at that. Now, instead of them being paid in 60, 80, 90, 120 days, whatever it is, after payment's been made by the eventual end user customer, now they can get paid at the time of order and get paid in a couple of days or one day or whatever the time may be. And think of the onboarding incentive that creates for participation in the network. Think of the network attraction that creates for your core sourcing platform now if you're this big electronics company like the one that we're working with. So that's why we're really excited about partnering with Sweetbridge and why we think the customers are really going to be excited about it as well. So that might have used my 20 minutes. We can go into the conflict minerals topic if you would like, or we can save that.
Well, you also had a component about identity.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that at all, or should we save that for another time?
We're looking at, we also have a blockchain research lab at ASU, and we're looking at a lot of different topics within that research lab. We're real excited about some of these identity topics, blockchain-based identity topics, be it for a land record or a student record or a health record or any type of title or an immigration record or an economic identity for somebody in sub-Saharan Africa or an economic identity for a Syrian refugee. We're interested in identity and assets and the management and the interaction of those in more frictionless environments. So, yeah.
Todd, will you talk a little bit about what the blockchain lab at ASU, what the future looks like for that, what the opportunities might be for this community?
Sure. Yeah, so we're just starting. I mean, it's me and a half a dozen or a dozen professors from different departments on campus. I think the nice thing is at ASU versus other labs that I've seen at other universities is it is across multiple departments. So we have folks from the law school participating, folks from the math department participating, folks from computer science department, from the IS department, from the supply chain department, from multiple different departments that are participating, and they all bring their unique characteristics and perspective, and that diversity means a lot, I think, to the lab. And the student participation from each of those departments also is really, really encouraged. So as you guys all know, ASU is a big place, and the computer science department's the biggest in the US. I don't know if it's the biggest in the world, but it's the biggest in the US. So there's a lot of critical mass of talent there with a lot of the foundational skills that we need for this dearth of blockchain expertise that we need. So, I mean, speaking somewhat to the choir here because we have a lot of skills right here in the room, but we need more of that, a lot more of that, and we need to create opportunities to bring very talented, smart computer scientists and IS majors and others up to speed on these technologies. So we're working hard to launch a blockchain certificate. A certificate would be a series of courses that you would add on to your degree of computer science or your degree of information systems or your supply chain degree or your business analytics degree or your industrial engineering degree, your operations research degree, whatever it might be. Adding an ASU blockchain certificate on top of that degree is one of the things we're looking to do right away. There's already some courses and some other things in development, but being able to offer that ASU branded certificate is something that we want to do, and we would love to have input on what the course content for that certificate would look like and what it would be. We have our opinions, but that's under development right now, and we want it delivered by from multiple perspectives, and not just be a computer science type certificate, but also have some other elements included. So we're excited to see how that goes. The lab is small right now. I mean, we're just starting, but we hope to be able to employ lots of students. One thing, a lot of the computer scientists at ASU are foreign students. They can't work for local companies. They can't work at a restaurant. They have to work through the university, or they start to retire time against their OPT, against their visa, right? So the clock starts to tick as soon as they start to take a wage from somebody other than ASU. So if ASU is able to pay, ASU can pay them an hourly wage for work that they do while they're students at ASU. So the lab will be able to pay these students an hourly wage, and we'll be able to work with companies and receive grants and other things for some of the work and the research that we're doing. And we're looking at all kinds of crazy, awesome topics. So, and the students are bringing some in, and faculty's bringing stuff in, and we've got a lot of things we want to work on. So it's a really, really good time. So cool. We'd love to have you engage, and if you've got things that you want us to consider, or training input, or content for courses, or whatever, we would just love to have your input.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So, normally, Todd is standing in front of a classroom like this, asking questions to the students. We get to turn the tables tonight and ask Todd some questions. So, anybody have any questions about Aperio or blockchain or anything else?
Yeah.
How blockchain technology can impact healthcare.
Yeah, so one of the identity management projects that we're most excited about is an electronic health record. Right, so I did some work for a large ERP software company recently thinking about this, and there's lots of people looking at this already. Google has their initiative, and other people have their initiative. But we need to manage our own health record. We need to have our own health identity instead of multiple doctors' offices having versions of our different care. We need to be able to manage our own health record, and then be able to permission different people to make updates to that as appropriate. And for insurance purposes and other purposes, you can't just manipulate your health record, or at least care from a physician yourself. But you can permission those people to make updates to your health record. You can add biometric information. You can add information from your Fitbit or your health app or your Strava app or whatever you like to use for your different exercise and nutrition and sleep patterns and everything else. There's a global sports initiative at ASU that is really interested in this topic, and they're going to fund, hopefully, around electronic health record. We have a behavioral health partner that is starting with us around just a health record for behavioral health patients. We may not end up being the big dog in that space, but it's a topic that we really like and are interested in, and it plays to the student record idea that we have as well, that we're trying to launch with ASU, where students, if I want a copy of my college transcript, I've got to send off for it and pay $50 and get Thunderbird to send it back to me, right? But yeah, Thunderbird, right? Where are you going? ASU. But think of a situation where the student holds his record. Yes, ASU or Thunderbird or whoever, Grand Canyon, updates it, it's permission to update it. Or eventually your employer is permission to update it with performance review information or project information or career information. It becomes a much more robust and authentic thing than what we've got with LinkedIn today, right? Nothing but a glorified resume somewhat on LinkedIn. All of a sudden now we get an accurate view of who people really are and what their experience really has been. Career centers and HR people, hiring people, other things. So that's a project that ASU is really excited about, and a service that they hope to be able to offer not just to their student population as well. So we'll see how that shakes out in the end. But just that's some thoughts around identity, and that's a good question.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
I'm
We'll
gonna.
save it for the panel.
Yeah. Let's get Scott up here, and let's pull these chairs out so you guys can kind of get out in front here. And I'd just like to say at this point, I'm actually a native of Phoenix, and I grew up just a few blocks from here. So I used to look across this field and see Grand Canyon College. And I asked you to consider that it wasn't that long ago that this very spot that we're sitting in was all desert. It was one of the most inhospitable places in the world for life and abundance and everything we see around us. And I assert that one of the things that's ushered in all this abundance is supply chain and the effective workings of the marketplace and tracking goods and services and all this stuff. So you might not jump out of bed in the morning and pick up your supply chain textbook, but, well, you guys do. But I ask you to consider that the topic that we're talking about tonight might usher in a new realm of abundance for people all over the world. So we'll open it up for questions for Scott and Todd and anybody else. Rich.
Yeah, so, obviously, there's a tremendous opportunity here for, and I'm speaking specifically, I guess I could like your perspective. What's the opportunity for Arizona, for Phoenix, to really be a player in this space and really, set ourselves apart from every place else?
Well, both of us think this is a huge opportunity. I mean, we think that Arizona and this metropolitan area is small enough and intimate enough that, and yet has enough capacity and diversity and economic activity that it is in a unique position to basically move fast and take a leadership role in the United States. And we'd like to make that happen.
Yeah, we love the legislation that passed that kind of gives us a little toehold into, hey, it's an economic friendly environment, right, for blockchain and for digital signatures and for some of the basic things that we need. So we've got, I guess, a toe in the water. We would like to see some more activity in that area, and we're trying to do some things to encourage that. But I think if we can all work together just to encourage our local city, county, government leaders, the presence of the university with programs in computer science and these other areas, we need to encourage their involvement. We need to move some of the investment focus in Arizona away from real estate and to technology investment. And this creates just a fantastic opportunity and a hot button I think we'll be able to address. And we're doing some things to try to make that happen. And there's been some yeoman's effort by some of, Senator Weiniger and some others. So, yeah.
But in our audience,
we should introduce Carolyn.
Carolyn, stand up.
Yes.
So Carolyn actually is with Copper Hill, and she's actually working with the legislative organizations, both federal and state here, and cities. Yep. To try to actually help bring everybody together in a dialogue that is creating Arizona as a platform for blockchain to lead the way, not just in the United States, but potentially globally.
That's awesome. We also have Mark Goldstein, who's active with the legislative and regulatory process as well. And Corey Williams has introduced us to, in fact, the three of us have been meeting with David Schweikert's staff and talking about, how can we make this a more friendly environment? So,
and I drive kind of blockchain policy considerations at the Arizona Tech Council.
Excellent.
We had a position on state virtual currency that hasn't yet arrived. So by my measure, there's at least 8 other states. High School's article that Arizona was on the leading edge of blockchain with Wenninger's bill just last week, I think.
Yeah.
And the governor pushed out that same article. I shared my perception that we're barely cracking the top 10 in that regard because we have no virtual currency, money transmission protocol, relaxations within our regulation.
Yeah.
So part of what this community can create is a regulatory friendly environment where we could really, blossom what's underway here. But Todd, you brought up a great point. I actually come from a real estate background. I used to be in construction lending with Mellon Mortgage and helped finance a lot of these subdivisions. I also spent 10 years as a very successful securities broker. And you bring up the point that this is a real estate centric town. And I do not give investment advice, but what we have seen with the cryptocurrencies in terms of investment performance, or let's say price appreciation, makes your wildest real estate speculation look like a certificate of deposit.
Yeah, for sure.
So we really need to get the word out that there's some real opportunity here, other than just real estate investment.
Yeah, I think so.
Other questions?
Well,
Can you utilize the entire functionality of each coin without owning or holding both coins?
Can you use the functionality of coins?
Can you utilize the entire functionality of both Sweetcoin and Bridgecoin without holding both coins?
No, well, you wouldn't have to hold Bridgecoin for very long, just for a short period of time, and then maybe convert to some other coin or convert to fiat. But you can't get, if you don't have Sweetcoin in our environment, then you're a guest, you're not a citizen of the economy. And so you would pay an interest fee along the lines of 2% interest, and you would pay cryptocurrency to fiat conversion fees using our exchanges. That would be along the lines of what's out there in the market today, which could be anywhere from 3% for small amounts of money to as little as, say, 20 basis points for, $500,000 or above in fees.
I was going to ask if you saw a presence in blockchain for ERP as strongly as supply chain.
is there an opportunity for blockchain around ERP?
Have you noticed that, does it have as much of a presence in ERP as it does supply chain?
Yeah, we think it gets rid of a lot of the ERP functionality, right? So especially some of the master data management challenges that you face. I mean, if you're familiar with some of the master data propagation that happens amongst and between different companies today, how you have to maintain product information and price information and availability information across hundreds or thousands of different places, where your catalog might be represented. Blockchain really simplifies that with just, hey, you manage your information, I'll manage my information, and when we transact, I'll come get your information, you come get my information on a permission basis, and we'll let it run. And that way you manage it once instead of managing it hundreds and thousands of times, which is what we do today, and it is a mess. That's one thing that it impacts.
I think accounting as a whole, people haven't talked a lot about the impact on accounting as a whole.
Yeah.
But the entire practice of accounting is going to become very different. And even what we think of as resource requirement planning, it's going to move from being something that's done just inside of the walls to something that starts to be happening.
Across the network.
Yeah, across networks and across business relationships.
So triple entry.
Triple entry accounting.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
I was really intrigued by the notion that, as I understood correctly, if you're a Sweetcoin holder, you could get interest-free loans.
Yes.
And so I know, given the principles you laid out, I imagine that assumes that there's really no risk of default. And so I was hoping you could explain a little bit more, what happens if there is a default? And let's say especially if your Sweetcoin collateral had fallen in value. So how does that play out?
That's a great question. So how it works is that each asset class has a certain value as collateral, which was not 100% of its value. For, say, 50% of its value, for example. But for something like the real estate in the United States, it might be as high as 85%, it might be as low as 70%, depending on the area of the country and the type of real estate. When the value of that asset starts to fall, it's being constantly monitored by oracles. Oracles are using external data sources to check what the value is. So in a cryptocurrency, it's just checking with exchanges to see what the trading value is. If that value falls below a certain level, you get a notice that you're going to have to increase either increase your assets or pay back some of your loan. because you're at risk of having the asset fall below something called the sell line.
Margin call.
It's just like a margin call. So if it falls below the sell line, which is like a margin call, depending on the asset class, it would be transferred and sold to pay off, or part of it might be sold to pay back, pay down your debt. Or it might just be transferred and held for a period where you could redeem it. And they'll depend on legal jurisdictions and on the asset classes as to what actually happens. Then you could have a case where the asset becomes worthless overnight, like somebody hacks the Ethereum network and figures out how to attack it in some way that basically destroys all economic value. Maybe it's a quantum computer or something. In the case of something like that happening, the network actually has trust intermediaries that make money by insuring the network, and some of the fees of the network go to those people, so they get paid for it. The other thing is, and this is not known by most people, is that in industrial countries, with the exception of Japan, the government routinely prints more money. And so what this means actually is that we have a problem if we don't have 2% loss in the network in pegging to the US dollar, because on average, the US government prints 2% more dollars every year. And you might think, oh, this is horrible. It's actually for a good reason. And that's that if the dollar isn't slightly deflating in value, then you might be tempted to hold it. And they don't want people to use the dollar as a store of value. They want it to be traded, because that's what creates economic activity. So 2% is the number that economists have kind of settled on as being the ideal number, and that it's not overly deflative, but it creates an incentive to trade. Well, in our environment, unlike the dollar, 100% of everything is backed by assets. And those assets in many cases are appreciating. So the problem with that is that, if anything, the value of our currency will have a tendency to drift up over the dollar. And so we actually have to have, and it seems crazy, a 2% loss in the network in order to have a ability to stay pegged to the dollar. And we had to actually do a ton of work to try to figure out, well, what do we do if we don't have that loss? How do we get the price to go down? And we'll have some economic papers that are being proved. So we have like a Fed Reserve economist and some other economists that are part of a economic advisory council that are kind of analyzing these kinds of problems for us, trying to say, well, here's what we would do if we were a central bank, and this is how we do stuff. And so we'll be publishing that here in the next few months. But it's a very thorny problem, actually, how we actually keep the value down. It's much more difficult than to keep it up. Thank you, Russ. Yep.
Actually, Todd, in your example, if the OEM reduces their forecast or their order and upstream suppliers have already committed, wouldn't there have to be complex smart contracts and modeling to penalize them for doing that? I mean, your example is perfect. I give them my forecast, they meet my forecast, and I pay them. But things get messier. So.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah, and I mean, our initial proof of concept was simply that. It was kind of a simplistic proof of concept, and we hope to take it to the next stage of a pilot where we can start to flesh out some of the more detail and put it into a real world practice. The conflict minerals opportunity really presents a parallel opportunity that might be less invasive than the core sourcing platform opportunity. The core sourcing platform is going to take a while to figure itself out and for people to get comfortable with it, and hopefully it goes great.
Have the complexity to accommodate those dynamic variations.
Not the platform that we've created. It doesn't have it right now. I mean, we could write smart contract code that would be able to, but we don't have it right now today on the platform.
Fair enough.
But the conflict minerals platform, that's a parallel system, less invasive to core supply chain, core business function, more of a reporting function to a large degree. So I think that one gets traction earlier, and from a infusing liquidity and Bridgecoin and Sweetcoin type opportunity, that one gets really interesting because it's the collection of electronics companies and their suppliers that are responsible for reporting, track and trace around those conflict minerals, right? So getting people accustomed to using blockchain and using tokens within real supply chain operations, even though initially it might be for reporting, it creates a really nice little beachhead entry point that we're excited about, and so is the folks we're talking to. So
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good question.
So we're at 25 minutes after the hour, and we promised to wrap it up by 8:30. So any final comments you two would like to make? Or?
I mean, we love the group. I mean, this is fantastic. I think you've done a great job pulling together a really nice nucleus of talent and interest, and thanks for having us. We're really excited about the opportunities in front of all of us.
Yeah,
it's great to see this much interest in Arizona. You know, I do think that Arizona has a tremendous future if it can actually, you know, come together. But you know, if all of us in the room can come together, and if we can get the legislators to come together, and ASU is such a, you know, a large institution here, and their focus allows a kind of a calling card to bring everybody together around it, that kind of as a neutral party that's also very exciting to me. And I think that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is really, I think we're on the brink of an opportunity for collaboration. And the very nature of many of these constructs starts off with this community that all of a sudden has a common incentive. And that's really, really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I don't know if you guys feel like you're on the sidelines, but this is a space where everybody wants people to get involved, and it's so easy to get involved. I mean, it's so easy to get involved. So, absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Any other feedback, comments?
How do you get involved?
Come talk to me.
Come join the lab.
Well, join the lab.
Yeah.
You know, there's other people here in the room. I mean, it's just starting. You know, this what's fun about the blockchain is that we are standing at a historic event, and people are going to go back and say, "This is the year." I mean, I truly believe this. If you follow the growth in, say, accounts at on blockchains, what you see is that something changed this year. All of a sudden, the pickup rate of account growth has gone up by a very significant percent. And this is the year. This is the year people are going to say, that was the year that this whole thing started taking off. And you're there. And it's a place, everybody is open. It's wonderful. It's such a community of, there's this kind of collective, you know, kind of get together, share ideas. You know, it's not this proprietary, I'm worried about competition kind of thing. And it's, hey, one beggar telling another beggar where to find food. That's what it still is. And it won't be that in another few years.
Yeah.
It won't be that. It'll be too commercialized, and it won't be like that. But it's like that now.
I've got a follow-up question though.
Yeah.
I see a lot of articles these days about IBM and everybody else filing blockchain patents. What do you think about that? I don't know what these patents cover, but what do you think about that as sort of dampening the entrepreneurial aspect of this?
That's a perfect question for the next session.
Leave a hanger. Leave a hanger.
The next session is going to be September 27th here in the same room, and it's going to be policy and blockchain. And we have Josh Bone, who's going to be on the panel, and David McCarville, who's going to be on the panel, who's going to be talking about some really cool stuff in terms of estate planning and trust and stuff like that with blockchain. We also have DJ Mills, who's on staff with Congressman David Schweikert, And we're working on some other folks, and if you got some ideas on people to invite, please let me know. But we'll be making some announcements on that. But the patent question is near and dear to my heart, for sure. So thank you, and consider yourself RSVP.
He just got involved.
Yeah. And and then in addition, in October, we're talking to some other local folks about that are creating some of the key blockchain and distributed ledger platforms, having them come in and do something like Sweetbridge and Aperio tonight. So, and we're also kind of working on a blockchain and real estate theme as well. So that's kind of what's in the works. We're also interested in reaching out to other communities. So there's something happening in the middle of October called BlockCon over in Santa Monica. I'm interested in going to that. I've been to some events in San Francisco, like the Decentralized Web Summit. Alio was there. Alio stumped 300 of the world's best computer minds.
Happened again recently at the congressional thing they held.
Yeah.
No one heard of that tech either.
So if anybody's interested in maybe doing a little safari and caravan over to some the coast and getting involved in that. Also, I've been to the Internet Identity workshop, which happens at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. That'll be coming up the week after BlockCon. So those are some of the things that are coming up, and I think it'd be really, really cool if the Phoenix and Arizona community started to interact with other communities in the Northwest, on the coast, and so forth. And we really see what we could create in the realm of collaboration. So we are at the end of our time tonight, and we should vacate here by 9 o'clock. There is a restaurant within walking distance next door, which I think it'd be really cool to head over there and just do some networking and informal conversation. And I so appreciate everybody being here tonight, your time, your attention, your interest. This is really, really exciting.
Thank you, Jay.
The north and south gates are already locked, so you'll have to go out the west gate around the 27th Avenue. Again?
Hey, Jeff.
Good to see you. Well, thank you. Thank you. Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you're good. Good. Yeah, what aspect?
So yeah. So the point
Yes. Really? Well, it's not a simple process.
Yeah. And our supply chain
Out of tech into actual marketing.
Yeah, some marketing,
Oh, really? Great. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely need help because we got so many projects and so many things going on.
Yeah. Well, and I was
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Makes different liquidity is everything is different, right? Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for your section.
Oh yeah, yeah. At first,
But they're really slow and moving, unless the defending is going to wake up with all like. Good part of the policy. So that's why I can